Okay, this is the first story that we're going to tell you. I shall put my feet up onto it now. Riddle me ree as I tell you. Cast your mind back. Cast your mind back to the 1970s, a time of austerity and poor taste in the British Isles when um, life was very tacky and there weren't many pleasures in the world. And I was at school in Bournemouth, which in itself was a challenge. And we were quite badly behaved, which seemed to be at the time quite normal for school children. Very normal.
It was certainly very normal for you.
It was quite normal at your school too, wasn't it? Bad behaviour. You know, people throwing bricks through windows, and football violence was rife, and punk and things like that eventually came in. But it was just before punk. Anyway, so, but I was very lucky in my class because I had a couple of people who were enormously funny. They were funny, and I credited them, some of them, in the front of the Unhappy Medium because they did make my life a lot funnier because they were funny. Because that's what funny people do. And anyway, one of them was Roger Davis, and another one was my friend Neil Torrable, and they were both very wicked and naughty people. And my friend Mark Conroy. Now, which one of them? I can't remember which one it was. I think it might have been, was it Roger Davis? Anyway, somebody. Well, at the time, in British gardens, because British towns are very small little gardens, there's so little space in the UK that everyone has their little gardens. And every Englishman's home is his castle. Little front gardens, little back gardens, and they're all neat and trimmed, and everyone mowing their gardens. But they're very small, but some people are a little bit weird about them. And one of the things they tend to be weird about them, the particularly strange people, are the ones that have gnomes in the garden. Now, were gnomes a big thing in Scotland?
No, they're not a big thing in Scotland, but I did visit. A scientist in California. His name is Andrei Lindy. He's originally Russian, and we couldn't find a good place to set up an interview. So he took me back to his house and made me some kebabs. And in his garden, there were hundreds of garden gnomes.
In California?
So, in California.
But being California...
Andrea Lindy has a lot of garden gnomes.
You wouldn't expect... Was he a particle physicist as well?
He's a cosmologist.
I find that terribly disappointing.
I found it extremely funny.
That's like that. Somebody I was working with, they were doing a book for we had an antique series in one of the publishers, and somebody had collected loads and loads of teddy bears, and they went to photograph these bears for a book, and there was a trailer. I think it was in Louisiana, and half of the trailer was teddy bears, and the other half were assault weapons. It's good that they have... It's a pity that there was no sort of... They couldn't combine,
Or could they not have found something in the middle?
Dolls with guns.
Anyway, get back to your gnome story.
Back to gnome story. Right, okay, so... one day, we had two schools, very important. We had an old school and a new school, and they built half of the old new school and then stopped, obviously run out of cash, so they had to keep the old school. The old school was fantastic, as we said, because it was this peculiar Victorian building with turrets that went nowhere and little staircases that wound up like this, and people could find their way under floors, and a very peculiar place, like Hogwarts, actually, that kind of crazy old building. One child got hidden under a stage and couldn't get out. He's probably still there. He'd be in his 50s now. Quite mad.
possibly a little bit dehydrated.
Bit dehydrated, well, that's right. No, they've knocked the building down, so he's in landfill, presumably. One of the more successful pupils, I think. Anyway, so you alternated, very weird. So one day you go to a state-of-the-art, more state-of-the-art, the 70s, state-of-the-art school, and on the other occasions you go to this.
Tim, you've got to get on with it.
I'm getting on with it. And on the other day you go to the old building, so you one to the other. Anyway.
Gnomes.
One day, this kid, when we were at the old school, this kid turns up, he's stolen 2 gnomes from a garden and brought them into school. So on the way into school, he's seen some garden gnomes in a garden and thought, oh no, I'll steal them and bring them to school. Can't remember who it was. It might have been some people, sort of people with names like only school kids ever have, with names like Martin McGookin.
Yeah.
He'll crop up again.
In Scotland.
Nobbler. Anyway, so in they came with these gnomes, and there were 2 of them. Now, if you imagine the school hall, every morning we'd have an assembly, and so the whole school would be lined up in this old school hall, and round the top of the hall there was a balcony, and no one would be on the balcony during the school thing, and there's a stage at one end, and on the stage would be the headmaster or the deputy headmaster, a teacher with a piano, and the head prefect. And around the edge of the assembly would be all the teachers. And at some stage you read out in assembly, somebody would read out a reading from the Bible, which is another story. I'll come to that one another time. And so we had this gnome and we didn't know what to do with the gnome. So my friend Roger Davis and I decided it'd be really funny to hang it on the balcony above the headmaster, so that it looked like it had hung itself. So we rigged it up like that, you see, by a piece of string, and it hung it there.
What's wrong with you?
Well, but so right. Anyway, so it's hanging there like, you see. And so and then everyone filed into assembly. So we're all standing like that, and gradually the entire school of about 700 pupils or something like that, gradually, one by one, they started to notice the gnome, and one by one they all started looking, and then eventually the hysteria kind of spread, and it spread to the pupils first, and then it spread to the teachers around the side, and then eventually it spread to the headmaster, and he's the deputy headmaster was at the hospital. So everyone is in hysterics about the gnome, and everyone's looking at it, and then they all go, "Oh, how funny, you schoolboys!" You know, ha 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 ha. Now, unfortunately, young people at school age, you get a bit of fun like that, and it never stops. They don't know when to stop. So the following day, we went to the new school. Now, overnight, independently of each other, most of the school kids in the school went out and they stole virtually every gnome in Bournemouth. Bournemouth's quite a big town. It's not a small place. The following day, the front of our school was covered in gnomes. There were something like 400 to 500 of these gnomes all over the roundabout at the front of the school where the buses went round, all around reception, in the assembly room, in the flower beds, in the bike sheds, up and down the stairs, outside the science lab. They were everywhere. There were gnomes everywhere. The police were called. There was a lot of trouble, right? And so anyway, somebody worked out who was responsible. But the thing is, it was my idea to put them above, me and Roger Davis's idea to put them above the thing. So, but all these.
So it was your idea.
It was actually my fault. It was my fault, I think, probably.
Okay.
Me and Roger. Roger's dead. He's beyond the law now. So um, so they wanted ringleaders, and unfortunately, they chose all my schoolmates, not me. And so they were called into the headmaster's office at the new school. So he's the proper headmaster.
So why didn't you go and fess up?
I didn't know it was happening actually. I didn't know until afterwards. Anyway, so
That's what you always say.
yeah, I was only obeying orders. It was not me. We thought there were WMDs. Anyway, so if you can imagine, my friends, they file into this office, and there's the headmaster in front of them, and he's like this terrifying figure, right, of the headmaster. I've never seen Harry Potter, so I don't know, but I'm assuming there's a headmaster. So you imagine you've got this headmaster, and behind him are 400 gnomes. They've taken all the school awards off, and they put them on the shelves. So there's a wall of gnomes. And there are gnomes pushing wheelbarrows, gnomes fishing, gnomes catching butterflies, gnomes sitting on toilets. There are gnomes kissing, gnomes hugging, gnomes lying down, gnomes on benches. Lots and lots of gnomes. And my friends had to be told off by the headmaster. He was telling them how serious it was. And can you imagine trying not to laugh? And Mark Conroy, Roger Davis, and Neil Torrable, and these people. I'm still very good friend. Mark was in our band. Roger sadly died, and so did Neil actually. And we were sitting. They said they was just standing there, being berated about. It's not funny. and Roger Davis said afterwards, all he could hear in his mind was, woo. So that was the funny thing. Anyway, it was in the newspapers, and gnome stealing and all this kind of stuff was kind of the big story in the local paper, and the police had warned everyone that it's not funny to steal gnomes. I remember one particular thing I do remember that made me laugh was there was a man in Christchurch, which is in one of the suburbs, I think, and he made his own gnomes out of concrete, which were really bad. They were really, really bad.
Seems a curious sort of life aspiration.
Well, it's something sort of. Wait, darling, we need to cut back. Our finances are in a terrible state. So
I need to make some concrete gnomes.
we're spending far too much money on gnomes. How can we economise? Yeah, so there you go. So that's the story of the gnomes. Now, it's a cautionary tale, boys and girls. It's not good to steal. It's not good to steal. And there is a happy ending because all the gnomes were reunited with their owners because they were all invited up to the school to be reunited with them.
So what they
went to the school assembly hall.
So they issued some sort of letter to all the people who'd lost.
Yeah, they said if you've lost your gnomes. Tearful reunions, It's you, Blobbo. That's not your wheelbarrow.
Sorry, I don't really know what to say.
There was a craze for a while as well. That some of the kids used to steal them and then send postcards saying, this is your gnome. I ran away and I'm sorry. I'm now in Bangladesh or I'm on my holiday in Turkey. But it's funny because that she's done. If you watch the film Amelie, they do that in that. But it was a bit of a craze for that in the 50s, in the 70s. I wasn't alive in the 50s. I'm really very young. I'm not very young, am I? I'm 52.
Lord Sponge, it's your 52nd birthday.
You can't ignore that many candles. You can't. All those blandly candles.
I'm surprised it didn't set the house on fire.
Yeah, it's a lot, isn't it? Right, you've had that story took up 14 minutes, but I think that's a good length for a story.
That's a bit long.
I'm not doing it again. The good thing about short hair, Denny, get more head rubs. A lot more.
Oh, because it's really furry. It's really furry.
Shave anything you can. Anyway, that's enough of that. Right, goodbye. I'm pointing at the camera, you see? Look, there it is. Okay, next story will be along shortly.